Buried Wishes by Jansen Davies. Chapter 1. Bloodlines and Promises. The twin moons of Yontili 8 hung low in the lavender sky, casting silver shadows across the ceremonial gardens of the Loe Palace. Beneath a canopy of whispering vines, two infants lay swaddled in silk, one wrapped in the deep indigo of Earth's royal house, the other in the iridescent weave of Yontili's crystalline lineage. Renala Loe blinked violet eyes at the stars above, her tiny fingers curling around the edge of her blanket. Beside her, Brandon Cross gurgled softly, his gaze fixed on the flickering lanterns that floated like fireflies through the air. They were 6 months old. They had no idea that their futures had already been bartered. The treaty was signed in the Hall of Echoes, where diplomats from both worlds raised glasses of starlight wine and spoke of unity. The marriage arrangement was buried in the fine print, an act of diplomacy disguised as destiny. The children would be raised together, their bond a symbol of peace between two civilizations that had never truly trusted one another. Their parents called it strategic. The galaxy called it hopeful. The children, in time, would call it something else entirely. By the age of 4, Rye and Bran were inseparable. They roamed the palace grounds like twin comets, leaving trails of laughter and mischief in their wake. While their parents debated trade routes and planetary defense, the children built forts from alien moss and whispered secrets into the roots of ancient trees. Brandon called her Rye. She called him Bran. It was the first rebellion, stripping away titles, ignoring bloodlines. In the quiet corners of the palace, they were not prince and princess. They were explorers, dreamers, co-conspirators. At 6, they buried a canister beneath the heartwood tree, each slipping a folded parchment inside. Alien ink on alien paper. A secret wish. Neither knew what the other had written. That was the point. By 12, they were confidants. Rye had begun training in the psychic arts, her mind sharp and restless. Bran studied starship schematics and practiced flight simulations in the palace's underground hangar. They shared everything, fears, dreams, forbidden thoughts about the future. And then the war came. It began with a rupture in the diplomatic channels. A mining colony on the edge of Yontili space was destroyed under mysterious circumstances. Earth blamed Yontili. Yontili blamed Earth. The treaties unraveled, the promises faded, the children were separated. Bran taken back to Earth, Rye kept behind palace walls that now bristled with defense turrets. The last time they saw each other, it was through a hologram. Rye's face flickered with static. Bran reached out, but the signal cut. Silence followed. The galaxy descended into chaos. And the two children, once bound by a promise, became symbols on opposite sides of a war that neither had chosen. Chapter 2. The War of Sons. Brandon Cross was 16 when the draft came. His royal lineage meant nothing in the face of conscription algorithms and planetary defense quotas. He was assigned to the 7th Deep Space Division, trained in orbital dogfighting and zero-gravity infiltration. His call sign, Phantom. He flew like a demon. His fighter carved through enemy formations with surgical precision, leaving behind trails of ionized wreckage and whispered awe. Medals followed. So did scars. The boy who once braided alien flowers into a princess's hair now wore a pressure suit and carried a plasma rifle. Rhaenala Loe, meanwhile, rose through the ranks of Yontili's psychic command. Her mind, honed by years of palace tutelage, became a weapon. She bonded with war beasts bred in the outer rings, creatures of scale and shadow, linked to her thoughts by neural lattice. Her speeches ignited revolts. Her presence turned tides. She became the face of the resistance, a symbol, a sovereign flame. Brandon became Earth's poster boy. His image adorned recruitment posters and victory broadcasts. No one remembered he was a prince. No one cared. He was a weapon now, a hero forged in fire. They fought across the same stars, never meeting. Their names echoed in opposing war rooms. Their victories were tallied in blood. And yet, in the quiet moments between missions, Bran would trace the outline of a violet flower etched into his cockpit. Rye's favorite. A memory. A wound. The war lasted 10 years, 10 years of orbital sieges, psychic storms, and shattered treaties. 10 years of propaganda and silence. 10 years without a single word between them. And then, impossibly, peace. A fragile accord was brokered by the Intergalactic Council. Earth would send a delegation to Yontilly 8 to finalize the treaty. Among them, as a gesture of goodwill, was Brandon Cross, hero of the war, relic of a forgotten promise. He arrived in silence, his shuttle touching down on the same landing pad he'd once used as a child. The palace loomed ahead, unchanged and unfamiliar. Guards watched him with wary eyes. The air smelled of memory. Brandon wandered the grounds, drawn by instinct. The garden had grown wild, vines overtaking stone paths, flowers blooming in chaotic defiance. He found the heartwood tree. The soil beneath it was undisturbed. He knelt, fingers brushing the earth. And then, footsteps, a voice. "You shouldn't be here." He turned, red hair, violet eyes, a face carved from memory and dreams. She looked at him, uncertain. "Have you been here before?" He nodded. "As a child." "What's your name?" "Brandon Cross." Her breath caught. "Bran." He stared. "Rye?" The war fell away. The garden held its breath. They stepped forward, touched hands, hugged, and beneath the tree, they dug. The canister emerged, rusted but intact. Inside, 2 parchments, 2 wishes. "I wish to marry Bran. I wish to marry Rye." The war had forgotten them, but they had not forgotten each other. Chapter 3. Ashes and Echoes. The garden was silent save for the soft rustle of alien leaves and the distant hum of diplomatic shuttles arriving at the palace. Brandon and Renala sat beneath the heartwood tree, the canister between them like a relic of a forgotten age. The twin parchments lay open, their identical wishes glowing faintly in the moonlight. They didn't speak for a long time. Brandon's fingers brushed the edge of Rye's parchment. "You wrote this when you were 6. She nodded. "I didn't know what marriage meant. I just knew I didn't want to lose you." Brandon smiled, but it was a tired smile, one worn thin by years of war and silence. "I thought I'd never see you again." "You almost didn't." Above them, the moons shifted. A breeze carried the scent of memory, burnt metal, garden soil, and the faint perfume of Rye's hair. The war had left its mark on both of them, scars beneath the skin, ghosts in their eyes. Inside the palace, the treaty delegation was preparing for the signing ceremony. Earth's ambassadors, dressed in ceremonial armor, rehearsed their lines. Yontilly's counselors debated the terms with quiet urgency. No one knew that the war's 2 brightest symbols had reunited beneath a tree. But word travels fast in a palace. A servant spotted them, then a guard, then a diplomat. Within hours, the story spread like wildfire. Brandon Cross and Rhaenala Loe, once betrothed, now reunited, had unearthed a childhood promise. The parchments were scanned, verified, and broadcast across the intergalactic accord. The galaxy reacted with stunned silence. Then celebration. The wedding was proposed not as a political maneuver, but as a symbol of unity, a gesture of healing. The forgotten prince and the alien princess, once torn apart by war, would marry to seal the peace. Brandon stood in the Hall of Echoes, the same chamber where his fate had been sealed as an infant. Now he faced a different kind of choice. "I didn't come here to be a symbol," he told the Earth ambassador. The ambassador, a grizzled veteran named Hallstrom, nodded. You came here as a soldier. Now you're something more. Renala faced her council. Some were thrilled, others wary. You were our blade, said Councillor Vera. Now you're to be our bridge. I was never just a weapon, Rai replied, and neither was Bran. Preparations began. The palace was transformed. The heartwood tree was chosen as the site of the ceremony. Delegates from every system were invited. The wedding would be broadcast across the stars. But peace is never simple. In the shadows of the outer rings, a rogue faction stirred. Veterans of the war who refused to accept the treaty. Loyalists who saw the marriage as betrayal. They began to move, quietly, efficiently, with the precision of those who had once served under Renala herself. And in the palace, beneath the surface of celebration, Brandon and Rai began to sense the tremors of something darker. Chapter 4. The Canister. The canister lay open between them, its contents simple and devastating. 2 wishes, written in alien ink on parchment that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Identical, unmistakable. Brandon stared at the words, his breath shallow. I wish to marry Rai. Renala's fingers trembled as she held his parchment. I wish to marry Bran. They had written them as children, before war had taught them the cost of hope, before bloodlines became battle lines, before love became a liability. I never stopped believing, Rai whispered. Brandon looked at her, really looked. The red hair, the violet eyes, the scar just beneath her collarbone, half hidden by ceremonial silk. She was no longer the girl who braided flowers. She was a warrior, a queen in waiting. And yet, in this moment, she was just Rai. I didn't believe, he admitted. Not until now. They sat in silence, the garden holding its breath. Somewhere in the palace, a diplomat's voice echoed through the halls. The treaty was being finalized. The wedding, now inevitable, was being woven into the ceremony like a golden thread. But not everyone celebrated. In the shadows of the palace, a figure watched, cloaked in ceremonial garb, face obscured by a veil of static mesh. A former general of the Yontili resistance, loyal once to Rhaenala, now loyal only to vengeance. The canister had been unearthed, the parchments verified, the wedding announced, and the countdown to sabotage had begun. Back inside the palace, Brandon stood before a wall of holographic projections, battle maps, troop movements, peace accords. He traced the edge of a star system he'd once bombed. His fingers paused over the coordinates of Varel Prime. Do you think they'll accept it? He asked. Rai joined him, her presence quiet but electric. Some will, others will see it as surrender. We're not surrendering. No, she said, we're choosing something harder. The ceremony was set for the next cycle. Delegates from across the Accord were arriving. The heartwood tree had been cleared, its roots reinforced with crystal scaffolding. The garden was transformed into a sacred space, part shrine, part stage. And in the crowd, the cloaked figure moved. A blade hidden in a bouquet, a signal pulsing through the neural mesh, a plan unfolding. The canister had revealed their hearts. Now someone intended to rip them out. Chapter 5. The Wedding Accord. The heartwood tree had never borne witness to so many eyes. Its ancient branches, once a playground for 2 children, now arched over a ceremonial platform carved from Yontili crystal. Delegates from across the Accord filled the garden, their robes shimmering with planetary sigils. The air pulsed with anticipation, and beneath it all, unease. Brandon stood in ceremonial armor, the polished plates etched with the insignia of Earth's fallen fleets. His shoulder bore the scar of Varel Prime, a jagged line that no medic had ever quite erased. Renala approached in silence, her gown woven from starlight silk, its threads humming with psychic resonance. Her war beasts waited at the garden's edge, cloaked in shadow, eyes glowing. They met beneath the tree. No speeches, no fanfare, just two hands reaching for each other. And then, detonation. A pulse grenade tore through the eastern archway, sending delegates sprawling. The heartwood tree groaned as its lower branches splintered. Smoke billowed, screams erupted, guards scrambled, weapons drawn. The wedding had become a battlefield. Brandon tackled Renala behind the ceremonial altar, shielding her with his body as shards of crystal rained down. "Stay down," he growled, already scanning for the source. But Rai was already moving. She rose, eyes blazing, and summoned her war beasts with a psychic command that echoed through the garden like thunder. The creatures surged forward, scaled titans of bone and shadow, intercepting the attackers with primal fury. From the smoke emerged the rogue faction, former Yontili generals, masked and armed with forbidden tech. Their leader stepped forward, blade crackling with dark energy. "You were meant to lead us," he spat at Rhinala. "Not marry the enemy." Brandon drew his plasma sidearm. "She leads with strength. You lead with fear." The battle ignited. Brandon moved like a ghost, his training kicking in. He ducked beneath a volley of pulse fire, returned 2 clean shots, and vaulted over a shattered bench to flank the insurgents. Rai fought beside him, her psychic blasts tearing through enemy ranks with precision and fury. The heartwood tree burned, the garden bled, and in the center of it all, Bran and Rai stood back to back, warriors once again. The rogue leader lunged, blade aimed at Rhinala's heart. Brandon intercepted, the plasma round catching the attacker mid-stride, but the blade grazed his shoulder, slicing through armor and flesh. He staggered. Rhinala screamed. She unleashed a psychic wave so powerful it shattered the stained glass canopy above. Light poured in. The rogue faction faltered. Guards surged forward. The tide turned. The battle ended as quickly as it began. Smoke cleared. Bodies were carried away. The heartwood tree, scorched but standing, loomed over the wreckage. Brandon sat on the edge of the altar, blood seeping through his armor. Rhinala knelt beside him, pressing her forehead to his. "You saved me," she whispered. He smiled through the pain. "You saved me first." The wedding resumed, not as a ceremony, but as a vow forged in fire. They stood together, hands clasped beneath the wounded tree, and the galaxy watched as love became legend. Chapter 6. Shadows of the Past. The garden smoldered. Ash drifted through the air like snow, settling on scorched petals and shattered crystal. The heartwood tree, though wounded, still stood, its bark blackened, its roots exposed, a symbol of endurance, of memory. Brandon sat in the palace infirmary, his shoulder wrapped in synth fiber gauze. The wound was shallow, but the pain ran deeper, not from the blade, but from the silence that followed. Rhinala hadn't spoken since the battle ended. She stood at the edge of the garden, staring at the wreckage. Her war beasts had returned to their chambers, their psychic link dimmed. The gown she wore was torn, stained with blood and smoke. Her crown had been lost in the chaos. She didn't ask for it back. Brandon approached slowly, his steps uneven. "You okay?" She didn't turn. They were mine. He knew what she meant. The rogue faction, the masked insurgents, former generals who had once sworn loyalty to her, who had fought beside her in the outer rings, who had believed in her vision, until it changed. "They chose violence," Bran said. "They chose me," she replied, "and I left them behind." The words hung heavy. Guilt, grief, the weight of leadership. Inside the palace, the treaty delegates were shaken. Earth's ambassador demanded increased security. Yontili's council debated postponing the wedding. The intergalactic accord issued a statement of condemnation, but not unity. Brandon and Renala had become symbols again, not of peace, but of division. That night, Rai wandered the palace halls alone. She passed murals of her ancestors, queens and warriors, diplomats and mystics. Each one had faced rebellion. Each one had paid a price. She stopped before a portrait of her mother, Queen Elenia Loe, the woman who had arranged her marriage, who had believed in diplomacy, who had died in the third year of the war, her shuttle sabotaged en route to Earth. Renala touched the glass. "I'm trying." Brandon found her there hours later. He didn't speak, just stood beside her, shoulder aching, heart heavier. "I don't know if this will work," she said. "It already has," he replied. "We're still here." She turned to him. "But for how long?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out the canister. The parchments were still inside. He handed hers back. "Read it again," he said. She unfolded the parchment. The ink had faded slightly, but the words remained. "I wish to marry Bran." She looked up. "You still want this?" Brandon nodded. "Not because of the treaty, not because of the war, because of you." She smiled barely. "Then let's finish what we started." The wedding was rescheduled for the next cycle. Security tripled. The heartwood tree reinforced. But this time there would be no ceremony, no spectacle, just two people. And a promise. Chapter 7. The Final Stand. The palace was quiet, not the silence of peace, but the silence after a storm. Guards patrolled the halls with cautious eyes. Delegates whispered in corners. The rogue faction had been dismantled, but its shadow lingered. Brandon stood beneath the heartwood tree, now reinforced with crystalline scaffolding. His shoulder ached, but the wound had become a badge, proof that love required sacrifice. Renala joined him, her gown replaced by a sleek diplomatic uniform. She looked every inch the heir to Yontili 8. But her eyes were softer now, human almost. The final confrontation had come days earlier. The rogue leader, General Zan, had escaped the garden assault. He resurfaced in the catacombs beneath the palace, attempting to detonate a psychic bomb that would fracture the accord. Bran and Rai descended together, navigating tunnels carved centuries ago by Yontili mystics. The duel was brutal. Zan wielded a blade forged from dark matter, its edge humming with anti-psionic energy. Renala countered with raw psychic force, her mind a storm of memory and fury. Brandon fought beside her, his plasma rounds carving paths through Zan's defenses. In the end, it was not power that won, but mercy. Renala disarmed Zan, her war beast pinning him to the stone floor. She could have ended him. Instead, she offered exile, a choice. Zan spat blood and vanished into the outer rings. The accord held. Chapter 8. A New Dawn. The ceremony was quiet. No fanfare, no broadcasts, no planetary anthems echoing through the stars. Just the rustle of wind through the scorched branches of the heartwood tree and the soft hum of starlight silk as Renala stepped forward. Her gown shimmered with threads woven from the psychic resonance of Yontili's moons, each strand a memory, each fold a vow. Brandon waited beneath the tree, his ceremonial armor dulled by battle and time. The polished plates bore the marks of war, scratches, burns, a deep gouge across the left pauldron where General Zan's blade had struck. He hadn't repaired it. He wanted it visible, a reminder of what they'd survived. Around them, the garden had been restored, not to its former perfection, but to something more honest. Vines still curled around broken stone. Blossoms bloomed from ash. The heartwood tree, though wounded, stood tall. Its roots had been reinforced with crystal scaffolding, but its scars remained. Delegates from across the accord stood in silence. No speeches, no declarations. just presence. Renala reached Brandon and took his hand. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. She looked into his eyes, violet meeting storm gray, and saw not the boy she'd buried wishes with, nor the soldier who'd fought beside her, but the man who had chosen her, again and again, even when the galaxy tried to pull them apart. Brandon spoke first, voice low and steady. "I don't vow peace. Peace is fragile. It breaks." He paused, then continued. "I vow to rebuild it. Every day. With you." Renala nodded, tears glinting in her lashes. "I don't vow perfection. I've seen what perfection demands, what it destroys." She stepped closer. "I vow truth. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts." They exchanged rings forged from alloy recovered from the wreckage of Varel Prime. Metal, once used in war, now reshaped into symbols of unity. The rings pulsed faintly, embedded with microcrystals that responded to their touch. A living bond. As they kissed, the twin moons aligned overhead. And across the galaxy, a new story began. Not of conquest, not of diplomacy, but of two souls who chose each other in the ruins and built something stronger than empires. The delegates bowed. The war beasts roared softly in approval. The heartwood tree shed a single petal, caught in the wind, drifting between them like a blessing. Later that night, in the quiet of the palace, Bran and Rye returned to the garden. No guards, no ceremony, just them. They sat beneath the tree, fingers entwined, and opened the canister one last time. The parchments were faded now, fragile. Brandon unfolded his and smiled. Still true. Renala unfolded hers, always. They reburied the canister, not as a relic, but as a seed, and above them the stars burned brighter than they ever had. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.